getting rid of the direct?
No, last year we used her funds for all of summer school. So we typically would have some, but for the most, that is a charge per. And
Okay.
we had a fee, and then ones that failed, we had a fee. Last year we used ESSERs. If I put it about one step, consider that we want to use sponsor funds against from a school that there will be need families.
Okay. I took a quick one in regard to number 837 out of touch. Saving of 3690. The flex of students versus students actually.
I think we're still on 40.
Are you trying to check?
Just I need
Here, okay.
sorry.
That's fine.
Everybody-
That's fine. I need about 70 questions because we're getting there. It sure is good. All right, move along.
And they talk just tired.
Those everybody now. Let's go.
I can ask
Yes. What is 8330?
so the one of is that selling I bring because years of
Yeah, I mean, I can say, speak for it's years for many of our students that have been is definitely providing and that's the boards and town councils.
Anyone else?
The professional substantial increase in either that how many
We provide the box, if for that number of people to any represent.
Yeah, that's all new. So the salary is part of our actual.
And you're reading that right now, right? With us being under negotiation,
Exactly.
right? So
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Is that so? We could break it out. What's salary increase and what's new positions?
Yeah, I'd like to know how
Yeah.
many extra staff there are.
We could definitely do that.
Anyone else with any questions?
The one thing I would like to add around the paraprofessional staff, I think that we noticed this year is, which isn't a surprise you've been hearing about all year, is several students having difficulty transitioning back into school.
Right.
But the unknown for the district, even relative to last year's budget, is there were some kids who never came to us in kindergarten or weren't with us at all in first grade who were Southington students, but maybe they were remote. So what the needs were may have not been necessarily obvious to the district in terms of pre-planning. So I know throughout the year this year and working with some of our elementary principals and special ed staff, when the need arose, we had to figure out what the best course of action was in terms of supporting that student adequately. So those were some things that we had to do after the fact.
Would some of these hires or these paras, would they be interim?
So, well, yeah, one of the things that it's kind of a twofold answer to that one. I had mentioned in the presentation about a special ed audit. So part of what we're hoping to find is some efficiencies and savings for you by the May meeting. Once the audit is concluded, with a strategy right now of looking for attrition, so that if there are, and we already have several that have either resigned or retired, not filling those until that need has been justified or exhausted through the audit.
Perfect, good. Thank you.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, James.
sort of a combination of 8335 and the out-of-town tuition that Joe was asking about. So it sounds like they're related, right? But so the transportation costs have gone up, but our tuition has gone down. So we're getting less students that we're sending out?
Twofold. Specialized transportation can be somewhat, depending on where that one student goes to, let's say Westport, that can be a huge bill. Or if it's specialized transportation in terms of it's a wheelchair bus that requires added assistance and special equipment, those types of transportation costs are a little harder to project out in terms of what typical transportation costs are. I know Mr. Romano provided the price of a regular school bus. So those are like the known costs, but the transportation, that fluctuates really depending on where the outplacement is and what the needs of the equipment are for the student that we're transporting.
Did you have a question, Mrs. Carmen? Okay. Everybody good on this page? Okay, well, my two questions got answered, so we'll move right along. Page 45. Questions from anyone? Yep.
The consumable techs, notice the last few years, there hasn't been any costs associated with that. Is that something that we've eliminated altogether? Or are they funded somewhere else? Or?
Well, these consumable texts are related to special education consumable texts.
Right.
So we still rely pretty heavily on consumable texts in regular education. But I don't, for the most part, we only had 1240. A lot of those consumable texts are workbooks that are associated with specialized reading programs. And so I don't know if it's such a small, it was $1,200. It really, at a price like that, it's probably a student who was receiving a specialized program and we had to order sets of consumable texts. So that could be as simple as that particular specialized program is not being used right now, depending on the needs of a student.
And that's fine. And maybe I just didn't word it right. I know that we have consumables for regular ed, but special ed doesn't have any. Maybe that's a better way of,
Well, every student gets a consumable text, whether you're regular ed and special ed, for what we use in our core academic areas.
Right.
So these consumable texts are for specialized reading programs that a special ed or a literacy specialist might be providing to a student, let's say with dyslexia for some sort of coding.
right, okay. So a special ed student could still get consumables.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
They're not out of
Yeah.
special ed budget.
Yep.
They're elsewhere, okay.
Anyone else? Joe? No? All good? Okay. Okay. Anything with the account explanations? Everybody okay with those? Okay. Can I just ask a question? What is the CLP program?
Collaborative learning program at the high school.
Yeah,
It's what?
it's the collaborative learning program at the high school.
Collaborative learning program.
Sorry, could you hear me?
Yeah. Okay.
No, I think it's this one. I don't know.
So it's a program at the high school for some of our socially emotionally disturbed students or
Okay.
behavioral needs. And as we have the Achieve program
Uh-huh.
for some of the cognitive, physical, and intellectual, this is for the social, emotional, behavioral needs of
Okay.
students.
Okay. Okay. And that's just that's the program, what it's called at the just at the high school.
Yeah, it's
Because I know
it's-
each level has.
Yeah, we have the alphabet soup. So it would be
Acronym.
team at the middle school,
Yeah.
and it would be space
Lids.
or lids down the elementary. There's lids 3, 5, and lids K2.
And
There's
space
two
is autism.
Okay. Please don't change them because I think I have them listed someplace, but yeah.
Well, they're on
Yeah,
that slide.
I know, there's
do.
some.
Got
I
that
do
slide
have a
for you.
cheat sheet.
Yeah.
I've got that. Okay, thank you. All right, so moving right along. Major projects and equipment.
We couldn't get a lower number there?
I don't know. A negative number really doesn't seem feasible, but
Did we have to, from last year's plan, I don't have it in front of me, but how much of that shifted when we planned to, I guess, I don't even know where it went. I'm assuming it went to 23, 24, but
Yeah, so, and I can let Jennifer speak to that, and I thought, and Kaya is here as well, in terms of the 5-year plan, and we did adopt right prior to the start of the budget process, the capital improvement plan, and there was some shifting of what could be done with current non-lapsing account funds, what would be pushed out into the next fiscal year or the year after. So as of next year, yeah, you can see proposed 22, 23, for the 5-year plan, we don't have anything in terms of capital improvement, but our plan was to put the major projects and equipment in that category, that line instead.
And most of the projects that were brought by the administration to us this year, you'll find later on in the book in the non-lapsing account. So we can discuss it further when we get to that section.
Yeah, a little bit different. We broke that out because typically the non-lapsing account we go over at, in the spring after the budget that, is done. But knowing that we had the non-lapsing account funds and we were putting nothing in this operating budget, we thought it would be a good time to vet those projects now. It also helps the administration, Mr. Romano and Ms. Hill to, think about bids and secure contractors and whatnot if we think these are things we can do now with non-lapsing account funds, in anticipation of the summer occurring versus when we used to approve it in May or June, it's sometimes hard to get the bids turned around and get the contractors a place to get the work done.
Everybody good? Okay. And moving right along. Any questions on 54, 55, 56? These are just, major projects for the following years, so it's not even this year. Now we come to the fund section. Page 59.
So as we talked about during the budget presentation, this was clearly a strategy that was intentional. I thought I could bring an operating budget to you guys that was responsible by using non-lapsing account funds for all one-time expenses. So that was all the major projects and equipment, special projects. So what you'll see now and what Mrs. Mallet was just referring to are things that the principals or administration had proposed as projects or equipment that was needed that we could fund through non-lapsing account funds and not have to fund through the operating budget in order to keep the number down.
And we also, on page 50, just thought it would be helpful to remind you about each of the non-lapsing funds that we've had, because the town and the Board of Finance has supported us by putting up to 2% of our unexpended operating budget into these non-lapsing accounts. And so we just wanted to show you where we were against those funds. So the next couple of pages is the detail on some of those, starting with the fiscal 19 non-lapsing, the fiscal 20, the fiscal 21, and now what we're proposing to do with the funds that are unallocated at this point.
That was page 59.
59,
Yeah.
okay.
And yeah, because even for myself, you're going back 3 years, so it's hard to say, all right, what did we have? What did we get done? What did we have? What did we get done? So we made a special section for you this year, especially knowing that some of our board members don't have that history. We wanted to make sure we were able to provide that.
Because these non-lapsing accounts didn't come into play until,
Correct. There was a change in legislation
Yeah.
that allowed boards of education, with the support of their towns, to carry unexpended funds forward.
right,
Is exactly what Steve was referring to. Even if we had unexpended funds in the current year and there was a project that needed to get bid, we run out of time in order to issue a purchase order by June 30th. So it's actually allowed us, as you'll see, to accomplish some of these projects that we've been trying to get to.
okay.
The bulk of this money is coming, last couple of years is savings from not being, or because of COVID savings.
Twofold.
Would not have gone.
A government infusion of cash,
Right.
right? So there would have been things, we would have been coming to you trying to figure out how to get devices for kids.
Right.
This money would have been gone. So that saved us. And I think in some other areas where we got federal funds, we were creative in using those so that we did not have to use these funds. It's certainly, we're not going to see numbers like this year after year. Even this year with being full in person every day, all year, every student, we don't anticipate having a number like this again.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So moving on to page 60. Does anybody have any questions on that from fiscal year 19? Just so you could see what was done with that account. And if memory serves, how old were those curtains, Mr. O'Shannon? Do you remember?
I think they were there before they built the high school.
Okay, just checking.
If you touch them, they fell apart.
No, those are the ones at South End that I gave the bill to Mr. Darrenowski for, but that's a whole different story. Okay. Moving along to fiscal year 20, any questions on any of those? Okay.
Eva?
Yeah.
I see that, I know we've had some discussion about the cracks at the tennis courts at the high school. And we're looking to, I guess, continually repair them. At what point are we going to, scream uncle and say, enough's enough?
You're spot on, and that's a big push for the athletic facilities project with the referendum. So this would absolutely be a Band-Aid for 2 years.
This still needs to be done, even though we're planning on having them replaced.
Yeah, our last crack replacement only held for about 2 years. So that's what we think we'd get out of it if we were able to fill them this year.
Likewise with the track.
The track might be a deeper conversation, but yes, definitely not a repair. We're talking about potentially removing rubber and just using the bare surface because it's so worn.
Did have an opportunity to walk on the track at the
Yeah.
Thanksgiving Day game.
Yeah, you can see it.
You hear about how bad it is, but till you actually walk on it and see firsthand what it's like,
Yeah.
it's an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah. I know Mr. Risser, and he is here. Okay. Mr. Risser and he took me around and showed me all of the spaces, and that's where I pointed out that you could put a cell phone in some of those cracks on the tennis court. I mean, these are hazards and waiting to happen. So we definitely want to have some short-term fixes just so the seasons can, be held and we can ensure the safety of the facility. But long-term, these are Band-Aids right now.
I think, Mr. Risser, you actually said if we didn't do this, some schools wouldn't come and play because of the fear of their kids getting hurt. And that coupled with the fact that the size between the back line and the fence doesn't fit, there's a lot of reasons that this stuff has to get done. Safety being the number one reason, of course, correct? Right.
Our practice this year, we're having a decision about whether we still have the stone buildings. I mean, we still practice carefully, but we're going to make that decision. We're still,
That's the other problem. It's labor. Yeah.
Yes, David.
Our role here. This is to Mr. Romano, if I may. Has anything been done to look at the walkways around each of the schools to check the concrete?
Sure. We actually have a replacement repair program in place to document each year where the cracks are, and we have a sliding scale.
You're not panning the camera anyways.
The area of the walk that's a more heavily used walk, it gets a higher rating.
You can't hear him.
Each year we do repair a little bit of walk, so some stuff comes off of this. Typically, every year we do reevaluate to see if there's candidly, I can't remember what we did exactly, but it's something we do on an annual basis.
I just don't see anything in the budget, to cover those costs.
Yeah, you'll see a project in the non-lapsing for the walks and ramps. And the other thing that we at the board have is another small amount of money with the town from a previous year project. And that money is available for sidewalks and ramps repair. So that's why the number that you're seeing here reflects the current needs. And Mr. Romano, as he said, is evaluating where best to spend those funds.
So you're saying it's in here?
It's in fiscal. It's on page 63. It's actually fiscal year 23. District-wide repair replacement of walkways, ramps, and sidewalks. And there is a money in there, but again allocated to non-lapsing. Page 63.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, I'm glad. Okay, any questions on page 63 then?
So, Madam Chair, we're getting word that some of the folks that are watching the stream can't hear the speakers that are out. So, if we ask
Oh.
you any questions, just come up to the mic going
Okay.
forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions on 63? No? Jasper, you good?
I think I'm good.
Okay,
Come on, man.
you're good?
Come
Okay.
on, man. Sorry, sidebar.
Okay, sidebar? Okay. All right, let's, moving right along, the summary of ARP and ESSER grants on page 64.
So, we know throughout the past year there's a lot of questions around the uses of the grant funds, what's allowable, what's not allowable, what's in the best interest of the community, what's in the best interest of the district, and what have you. So, similar to non-lapsing, we created a special section of the budget book for all of you, which pretty much outlines what the grant award amounts were and what has been encumbered and expended to date, in terms of, and what are the plans for future use. The other thing that I'd pointed out at a previous workshop with you or budget meeting in the past, these grant funds you have to apply to the state. They're not discretionary funds that you can just spend how you want when you want. There's rules associated with SMART goals that we had to create and data that gets collected throughout or at the end of each fiscal year. And so it is one of those things that the plans, the application was submitted in mid-August. It was due August 16th, and we didn't hear back until, I think we badgered them quite a while.
It was approved on October 29th.
Yeah, it took about 2.5 months for us to get approval on the use of those funds. But as everything that we had submitted has been approved by the state as appropriate use.
And that's the information that you see on the next supporting pages. The descriptions of the uses of the funds came directly from our grant applications. And so we just set it up similar to the grant application. So if you're wondering why all those subtotals, that helps you tie into any grant applications. And the first column we had is the budgeted amount, and then we tried to show where we thought at this point the money would be used in which fiscal year. And you'll see there's not a lot of funds left in those, the 22-23 year, 23-24.
And so as I'm looking at this, we have the one, for example, the one-year positions. Those are the ones that we hired just for this year for the lower grades. And then that funding stream ends and those,
Yeah. One of our
minutes.
strategies was to reduce class sizes this year, knowing that it would be the transition for back to school for kids would be difficult, especially in our early grades where they had what I would always call the interrupted kindergarten experience and the compromised first grade experience. And so we were successful in reducing the class sizes. We were able to staff. The elementary principals did a wonderful job all summer interviewing and bringing in qualified staff. But yeah, the class sizes that we're able to have this year aren't something we can sustain with the normal operating budget.
okay. Okay. Any questions?
I just wish it was called The Adventures of ARP and ESSER rather than Summary of ARP and ESSER Grants. Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Okay.
I haven't slept.
I know, I can tell, but that's okay. You're doing fine.
And I wanted, on page 67 and 68, I just want to acknowledge the special education department with their use of the funding. What we've been trying to do is one-time expenses with grant funds so that we're not faced with situations where we're grant funding positions and then the grant money, our IDEA money is not nearly as large as ESSER2 or ARP ESSER were. So Rebecca Cavallaro and the special ed coordinators and their team did a nice job being intentional with this use. And within this funding source is the money that we would use to have an audit performed. So that would not come out of the special education budget, operating budget, that would come out of these grant funds.
Got a question on,
Steve, how many students do we have in the Stellar program?
In the Stellar program,
Yeah, do you know by any chance?
not off the top of my head, but I could get that for you.
No,
I don't know if you have the number.
no, I don't have the exact number. You don't know?
About 23, but we'll get you the number.
Okay, thank you.
There were some changes recently too.
Okay.
a quick question on page 66.
Yep.
Let's go back. So some of the software that was purchased under ESSER 2,
Mhm.
was that meant to be like a permanent solution for Southington, or are we like doing it just because we had school from home?
So yeah, that's why you'll see they're not in ESSER. Well, there is no ESSER 3 or ESSER 2,
Right.
2223 money left to spend it on. But remember, we saw the increase in the software operating budget line item that Jasper had been asking about.
Yes.
Not all of these products are on that list.
Okay.
So some of those were what we needed at the time for the situation we were in,
Got it.
and some of these became tools that our teachers started to use. That I think now that we are. As Mrs. Savalkal said, content agnostic. A lot of teachers across content areas are used to using them with the devices for kids. So to pull them away now is where you create the morale issues. Like, all right, so you gave us this great tool, you gave us all this training, we're using this, and now you're taking it away. And so we really tried to think about utilization across content areas in terms of what software was worth keeping versus what was maybe unique to the time that we were in, and as I had said, that line item during the peak of COVID was over $500,000. It was about $540,000. We're down to about, I want to say 400, high 3, with still an intent to try and continually reduce that further, but understanding that we are also still in a pandemic and many kids are still remoting in.
No? No? Everybody good? Okay. Coaches,
Yes, I got one more question.
go for it.
Quick. Are we anticipating having to give the food service another loan?
No,
Okay.
not at this time.
Okay, 67, 68. Questions? Yeah.
One, just a point to make, because this will come into play again next year. So it's just, but saying it now. We had come to you in the spring with a request to increase the space at the old Branford Hall. They downstairs had been vacated, and it was a much more suitable space for the population, both in square footage and access. And so at the time you had approved that, and we are using grant funds for that. That is not in the operating budget in terms of the cost of the increased square footage for that lease, which is what we said in the spring we'd be doing, that would be grant funded. It would not cost the board in the operating budget this year.
And that covers us for 2 years.
No, it's a year-to-year lease, yeah.
That's
But it will,
24
there will be a
months.
cost
Yes,
Out
at
of
some
the
point
budget.
down the road.
Yeah.
down the road.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Next year.
Can I ask I may have asked it earlier when we had the initial discussion. Is this a triple net lease?
Triple net lease?
Well, do we pay all the utilities? We pay,
We pay. There's a portion built in.
In the new space, we're taking over the electric meters in the space. They're projecting, right now, we're currently paying $600 a month for all the utilities, and they're proposing or predicting that it might be up to $1,000 in the new space because of the expanded space. So the extra $400 of the utility costs is included in this the ARP IDA, where we have the Stellar lease here. That does include all the incremental costs. So we're just paying a lease cost and utility in that space.
Anything else?
Terry, Mrs. Carmody, we were able to find out that there are 20 students currently in the Stellar program.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, everybody good? Okay, last page, page 69.
Last question.
Any questions?
So if I could just take a minute, I really want to thank my entire leadership team that's here tonight, the administrators, the coordinators, cabinet, central office staff. I want to thank the Board of Finance for coming tonight as well. It's always a little dreary sitting through a workshop. I've been to many of them myself, and so I appreciate you guys coming out and hearing the answers to the questions and learning more about our budget.
And I would like to thank our administration for their work on making this, yeah,
Pretty good.
thank you. No, for a great job, really, really and truly. For someone to come in and actually look at this, it is understandable. So I do appreciate that, and I know my fellow board members do as well. David,
Yes, it sounds like you're getting ready to throw us all
go
out.
home? Yeah.
Before we do that.
What did you need?
From Tuesday night,
Oh, okay.
okay, where I had asked for
go over
a
those.
increase in the contribution for the robotics. Could I request I'd like to request a consensus? See if we
Okay.
can,
We didn't, my mistake, we did not even go over these, so thank you for reminding me, and let's take a look. Which one was yours? Let's see. The robotics. 10? Okay.
Can we talk to the robotics team for a time machine to go back to the 0102 school year budget? Because that'd be great.
There was going to be were you able to put together the list of what the other groups got
Yeah.
as well?
So that is in, it's because there are no other groups that receive a direct contribution. So I described in here that, like the math team has, transportation to their meets. The DECA Club and the FBLA have luncheons at the corner cafe with, they call them business meetings and board advisory meetings. So those two groups benefit through that line item as well. In the past, we had done partnerships in science, which was a program that John Duffy took care of with the middle school in conjunction with two other towns going to CCSU for programs, and then the robotics team. So I did address that there, but there is no other club that we're directly making a contribution towards. So
So the only thing the first gets right now is that 5,000 from the
That's
board?
correct.
That's all they get? No
yeah.
other assistance, no other
No.
transportation, no nothing?
no.
I don't understand what you're saying.
No, I did not realize that no other organization got anything. I would be willing to increase it to 7,500 if they're,
Yeah, so would I.
okay.
Well, I'm asking.
They're not getting busing, they're not getting,
That's
yeah.
right, they don't get anything like that.
they don't get anything. It's kind of like uniforms, you
Right.
know, they don't.
And
So-
unless they get a line item in the budget, I'd be in favor of that, Dave.
All right, so let's do a consensus. Who would be in favor of increasing? Zaya?
I would.
Okay, James?
Yeah.
Joe?
I think it should be private. Again, I
Okay.
think they should continue to fundraise. I guess I'm a little confused here. So essentially, we're doing 5,000 already, and that's not enough to cover expenses, as far as the.
No, their expenses are tremendously higher than that.
Right.
And they get funding from donations, from parents, from companies, whatever. So, transportation's a big cost because they have to transport this big robot to all the competitions.
Right.
So there's,
So that's specifically what we're talking about then, is essentially it's more like transportation funding to.
well, no, it goes into their general account and they handle the funding and they build the robot. They have to buy materials and such. So they have a big budget that they work from.
I will say, and just in terms of student impact, that's what I always look at. There are over 100 students in the program,
Right.
and they are highly successful and they're highly supported by the community. So for $2,500 to impact 100 students positively, I say is a good investment. That's just my own 2 cents.
But I guess my question is, how do we come up with the arbitrary number of 2,500? Like, is that,
I came up with the $2,500.
okay, versus.
I could have
but
said
again, like,
10,000, but I,
Well,
in
but
light of the-
I guess like my question is, again, like, it's kicking the can, right? So essentially, if there's a reasonable need for, say, 10,000 or 15,000, again, like, I look at something like this because of that impact, like the marching band, right? So essentially, that's something that impacts our community on a regular basis. All the other things outside of just the school stuff that they do, all the programming that they do, basically building a family for kids.
That's very
I
much
know
like a
that
lot.
this happens here as well. So essentially, again, comparatively to, say, like marching band, like what I know that that's looked at a little bit different because we have students actively doing that during school. I know that this is a lot of after hours work and that type of thing. So, realistically, like, is another $2,500 even enough? And I'm of the mindset of, again, like, if we need $10,000 or $15,000, I'd rather just know that number and be chatting about that number instead, rather than like arbitrarily adding a couple dollars here and there.
they never came to me and asked me for anything at all. In
Right.
fact, when I had come, I think it was some years back, I came with the recommendation of, coming up with a $5,000 number.
Right.
And they were very appreciative of it. I mean, we see what it does with the school. I mean, the involvement with the students, the staff, the parents. And so I just thought, I've been to a couple of the competitions.
Right.
And they're, I wouldn't say they're struggling financially, but it's a task. No different than the band. The band backers raise a lot of money.
Yep.
We donate to the
donate.
band.
Correct.
Donate to the
I
band.
think it's
Created a line.
$10,000
Yeah.
or whatever a year
Right.
to help offset their costs, because they pay most of their own transportation,
Right.
so forth. So
Again, like, I'm not disparaging it. It's more of, again, like, I guess, in hearing what you have to say, and again, like, thinking more, again, tired mind, extrapolating it out, it's just more of, I'd rather see us, I mean, if we give the marching band $10,000, like, why not? That's all I'm saying. Again, like,
I can tell you, there's a chance that we're going to be able to bring you another reduction next Thursday evening. That if you were to increase that 2,500 to 5 or 7,500, you'll still end up with quite a reduction next Thursday evening. Not a huge reduction. I don't have any breaking news for anybody, but something where if you were to do this, it's going to keep us still around where we're looking at right now, or where we want to be when we move forward with the Board of Finance.
And the other thing is next Thursday night, the band is, not the band, the robotics team is actually coming to the board about their field trip. So
Nationals, yeah.
we could
So-
ask if they
what-
want to bring,
what do we give?
Yeah.
I mean, what type of contribution do we make to the marching band, for example?
I'm not sure that we write a check to the marching band, but what we did do several years ago was put a new line item in there for new music equipment to try to offset some of the big equipment items. I'm sorry, band
$10,000?
items.
Yeah.
It's, I think, up to $11,000 now. And Sarah Osias, who's the director of the marching band, works in conjunction with my office to decide what instruments to purchase. And over the last few years, we've actually used that money to buy instruments at the elementary level too, like so that all the schools are getting some kind of instruments. So I don't want to say that it's specific only to the marching band, but at the beginning of that money, I believe they bought some really big,
We just,
big items.
Originally, it was going to be just for the marching band, but then as
yeah.
System-wide music.
Yeah, so-
she wanted it, bring it to the elementary schools. So that's what feeds up to the.
Right. Right. And so that music equipment is an actual line item on one of the pages.
Musical equipment.
Yeah.
Because my first motion as a board member was to vote for new band uniforms. That was 14 years ago, and they just last year got new band uniforms. We provide for sports teams, and I think these accounts are accounts for those other activities that aren't sports related. So for marching band, for the robotics, that we make contributions. but the families and the members are still doing an amazing amount of fundraising to support these activities with private,
Right.
private contributions from the community.
And the other thing to note, we did talk about it the other night, but the boys hockey club is asking for a $10,000 line item as well, and that's under the non-lapsing. So that would be another club that you would be supporting with a $10,000 contribution.
I mean, we're going to be having a discussion about infusing millions of dollars into our athletic department and everything else. I mean, I don't think it would be unreasonable to sort of double what you're asking for and do
Well,
15,000.
Not that I consider myself fiscally conservative. I think they could use some money and, to help offset some of their costs. And I don't want to be too cheap. If you wanted to,
Can I get that on the record?
but,
David,
No,
you have a
I-
reputation to uphold.
I
Come
mean,
on.
we've, in the past, we've had, things like this. I know it's an annual thing. I mean, 25 is a modest amount.
15,000. I think that should be the magic number for them because of, again, what they do, the number of kids. That's less than $20 a kid. I really think, Dave, like, I think you are being too modest with this.
If you want to present that, I would support that.
I think the one thing we need to be careful though is we start opening up
Yeah.
to one organization,
Pandora's
other
box.
people are going to start coming
Meet in
in
the
as well.
middle and say 10.
When we look at the band, for example, the band is not just a marching band. It's also
It's a
it's a
credit.
credit. It's a
Yeah.
credit. It's a course. It's a class that they're taking, and they're getting educational credits for that. The first robotics is not a credit, but it is. I mean, it's the impact is substantial. But I think we got to be careful when we start opening up to say we're going to give you 15, and then this one's going to come and say I want this. Where do you draw the line? Is the question. So I think the modest. I mean, I'd love to give them 20,000, but a modest increase. Looking at that, helping them along, helping them with their fundraising that they're doing on their own, right? And the fact that you had mentioned we have some tremendous families in town that are actually contributing to them both financially and use of the facility that they've got. I don't know. I think going too high too fast is going to be a problem.
I would agree.
I agree.
We'll see how.
I think the 2,500 is a great
good
next
number.
step.
Yeah.
And then looking from that point forward, if there's anything, I mean, we see where they're going to use the money for, and I'm sure they'll tell us where they're going to use it for. But I just want to use the term. I don't want to open Pandora's box and say,
Right.
we got 10 other clubs that are going to now say, well, okay, what about us in the budget? Especially hearing that there might be some savings, there might be some extra funds.
Well,
Where can we?
I can assure you the savings I'm bringing you Thursday is a one-time savings.
Understood. But
And
where-
as soon as you see it, you'll know why.
Okay. So that's my perspective on it. Again, don't want to be cheap on it, but you want to make sure that we're responsible and not opening the door.
All right, so if we say 7,500, you said yes, James?
Yes, but I'd like to see 15.
Okay. Yes?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Jasper? Okay.
So clarification, so the consensus is to not add 2,500, it's to add 7,500?
No.
We're
it's
already-
go to-
The new number would be
The-
75.
The new number is
Okay,
75.
so they're at 5, we're going to go
Yes,
25 to
right,
get them
we're gonna go
75.
up to
Gotcha,
75.
just making sure.
Okay.
All right, so we have a consensus then to add the 2,500?
Right.
Yes.
You're bringing up something that I saw in the, in here, the hockey team. And I know it's a co-op and such, and we really don't participate any funding to that.
So Mr. Rister is here this evening, and we spoke about this earlier today. He is teed up and ready to go.
Well, thank you for your consideration about hockey. If I may, I'd just like to do a quick little review of our ice hockey team. It is an interscholastic team here at the school. It's technically not a club. We do have a girls' ice hockey club,
Okay.
which is none of our clubs, as Jennifer pointed out, are funded in sports. We have 4 clubs: girls' ice hockey, boys and girls rugby in the spring, and also the co-ed skiing team over at Mount Southington. So none of those, those are all player family supported totally. Hockey has been with us for over a decade. It started as a club back in the first decade of the 2000s. Then it evolved into an ice hockey team with Hall being the lead co-op in West Hartford. During that relationship, and it was a really good relationship, certainly for us in getting our hockey program going for our Southington ice hockey players. But a big part of that was in West Hartford, the Hall and Connor teams do not have to pay for the ice. The town gives them the ice as a courtesy, something in the charter of the town. It's just what happens. So when our families did not have to pay for ice as part of that relationship with Hall because Hall wasn't being charged for the ice. So when last year, we had to opt out of our relationship with Hall because the CIAC, who, as all you know, governs sports for the interscholastic sports, said that the numbers that players that Hall had, they could no longer have a co-op partner. They had to have their own team. So because of that, we had to shift and try to get our own co-op to be able to go forward and continue it. And in the short term, to continue, especially for our seniors this year, to have them and our upperclassmen, and now we have some freshmen joining the team, we had to go out and get our own co-op. We didn't have a goalie for the team. Cog and Chog had a couple players. They had a goalie. We have a player from Westbrook. So we have 19 of the 23 players this year, but every Southington family and the Cog and Chog and Westbrook families pay $1,100 to fund our ice expenses at the Newington Arena and at the Champions Ice in Cromwell. So we have about a $20,000 bill this year. I would tell you, no, as Dave said with robotics, nobody has come to me as the athletic director and said they're funding it. They do not have any problem funding it. Although from an equity point of view, I feel like as an interscholastic sports here at the high school, we go out to other facilities, granted at a just a portion of the price, but the YMCA, we rent that for the boys and girls swimming team. As you know, our gymnastics team rents the American Gymnastics Center. My feeling is that we don't have pay per participation here with our board. Our other athletes their families don't have to play soccer, football, lacrosse. My feeling is any support from the board would be appreciated to offset what we have to pay for the ice, which is much more expensive, to be fair, than the Y or the American Gymnastics. This year it's over $20,000. It's approximately, by the time we finish the season, it'll be $20,500. So my view is, as an interscholastic team, and I will tell you that the girls ice hockey team, they're a club, they pay all their expenses, but this is one of the 27 interscholastic programs that right now the board has approved. So I think any support from the board, and there's some money put in here in the plan, which I don't even think reaches $20,000 at this point. I think it's a $10,000 number. So it would only maybe bring the fees down from $1,100 for the family to approximately $500 or $550. But I think it's a reasonable thing to do to show that we're supporting the team that we've had for more than 10 years. But again, this board has discretion on what it does, and certainly we're going to respect any consideration that the hockey team gets under their new format. I can tell you this: there's 19 families that are very appreciative that we still have hockey at Southington High School, and don't let me be the source of that. They can tell you. So whatever the board decides about that $10,000 item, I know that, I respect whatever decision comes on that. I just feel from an equity point of view, it's the right thing to do. So thank you very much.
Don't leave yet, because I have a question.
Yes.
Do we pay for anything for them, their uniforms? I mean, we do for other sports teams, so do we?
No, well, this year the families all paid for the uniforms as well. They got new uniforms, home and away. We could potentially put them in a rotation with our other teams, but we haven't had to do that. In fairness, when they were with Hall and that co-op, they also took on that. It's just an expensive sport, as you know.
No, I realize that, but I'm thinking if they're a CIAC sanctioned sport and we pay for other sports teams' equipment and we pay for their uniforms and I know as a football mom, my sons played football and I had to pay for each one. It was $400 to $500 depending upon what the year was, and do fundraising. You get that. But we're not doing.
Well, when we were in the Hall co-op, we did pay Hall back for half of bus transportation, half of officials. So we do utilize our accounts to support the hockey, as we still do this year. So it's not like we're not paying for anything.
Okay.
It's just the uniforms. We could possibly evolve into that, rotating into with our budget. But at this point, we're sort of slowly making the transition. But I think that's something we could take under consideration. Yes.
I do believe we pay for one of the coaches.
Yes, we have stipend positions for hockey in our operating plan. So yes, that's another
Yeah.
point. We do pay
That's
for
the
that.
only amount, I believe, that comes out of the operating budget. And the other payments that he was referring to about paying for busing, all of that went through the activity account at the high school. So those hall expenses did not come out of the operating budget.
Right, we took it out of the SSA, they call it, and then we gave it to Hall because we had to contribute a per player ratio of what the expenses were to transport kids. So there's been some funding going on. Thank you, Jennifer,
not
for
to
reminding me
the
about the coach,
extent.
because we provided a stipend position to that Hall Southington coaching staff too.
Okay. So now this year we have one coach? We have
No,
one coach?
we actually have in our budget, we never use the other position, but we have a head coach and an assistant position. That's what we have. So we are providing support on the coaching end.
Okay.
Which again, remember, all of our clubs at the high school, the coaches don't get paid, so.
Yeah. Zaya, you
But
had a
this,
question?
but the comment more than a question. So the funding you're asking for, the $10,000, well, not that you're asking for, but that's in the budget, is in the non-lapsing fund. So after this year, it's gone.
Right, well,
It's a
that,
one-time expense. So this is something like we should probably be looking at, since it is a sanctioned sport. I think you're not looking for 1 year's. You wouldn't be staying
Just
there
looking
for,
to pay
so
for
give me
it
a
that way.
1 year thing. You're looking for something that would potentially go on continuously, correct? A line item per se.
correct, to offset the ice expenses would be, I think, the primary feeling. I mean, we're kind of taking it 1 year at a time here, but
I want to give
yes.
the impression that there's something in the budget, because it's not. It's in the non-lapsing fund.
That's
that
very
after this
true.
year, gone.
Correct.
So I think this is a different conversation than what's in the budget. It's where do you go forward from here? Does this $10,000 in the non-lapsing fund then roll into potentially in these conversations that we're going to have a line item into the budget?
Right, and I actually made a note of that for our discussions, that we are going to have to figure out how we go forward after this transition year.
David?
Add a little historical commentary to this. I was on the board when the hockey team came and wanted to organize a club. And it was made clear at that point by the board that they would basically sanction the club with the understanding that it would be a club and that there was no expectation that it would ever become an active funded sport of the high school because of the cost. And they at that point, everybody agreed, well, you'll never have to worry about it. You'll never hear from us again. Unfortunately, 10 years later, all those students graduated, the parents moved on. We've got a whole series of new parents that have a different idea of how the sport should be at the high school. I think it's a great program. I think it's great for, building character, toughness. Although I've seen some of the other, I haven't seen the hockey team at the high school play. But I've seen other college, and they get kind of ambitious out on the ice. So I think it builds character, I think. But, with the understanding that was agreed to 10 years ago, 12 years ago, to where it is now, it's like things change over time. I can go back further when the band was in its infancy, and they had trouble getting students to participate in the band. And now it's probably the biggest, it's not even a club. I mean, it's almost it's an organization. But it's worked
It's
out
not a
well.
cult.
In a good way.
In a good way.
In a good way.
In a good.
So,
And I actually, when we talk about clubs, I excluded another club, which is the Powder Puff football team for the girls. That's a club too at the high school. I don't want to. I realized I didn't mention that as one of our clubs, but no, I think at some time before my tenure here, at some point, Mr. Darrenowski, there was a decision made that it would become an interscholastic hockey team. I'm not. So maybe somebody from the board remembers that, but it did become an official.
a lot of things in
Right.
the school system evolve, and they just happen. And it becomes understood that, well, they've been here for so long, they must be, it must have been approved. I don't even know if there was ever an approval to, sanction them as a sports team.
No, they did come to us for that. They did. Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
They did. I was here. I remember.
Yeah,
that. We were
the
here.
girls tried to
Yeah.
get, and that didn't but the boys.
But I think when
that
it
did.
started, what Mr. Donowski's talking about, it did not enjoy the popularity that it did when you had your association with Hall. It became quite popular, and your numbers just grew. I mean, these parents are paying, what did you say, $1,200 each?
It's for this
Approximately?
$1,100 this year.
Excuse me,
But,
1,100.
yeah, we were to negotiate with some of the arenas and get it, which we thought was about a half of what they would pay if they were playing a travel club team. So we were happy to keep the prices down, but keep in mind half of their practices are at 5 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
So
awesome.
we're getting we're trying to keep the budget within reason. So
Well, we do have 10,000 in the non-lapsing account.
Right.
Right.
For this
So
year.
that's- and I-
This year.
I think that's great. But I think it'll be something to discuss for the next, not this budget, but the next budget.
It is an equity thing. It is truly
It
an
is.
equity issue we had to look at.
Mr.
But I guess I understand, and I think that this is definitely a conversation that we should be having, and I do think that we should be providing some offset to this. The only thing I will say, though, is these non-lapsing accounts, just about every single one of these is tangible product that we're purchasing and tangible improvements that we're making to the school. This is paying for rent. I don't think that that's in the spirit of the non-lapsing fund. And, realistically, I'd rather see us do the $10,000, just add it to the budget. And, again, not make this a conversation to be kicked down the road that, this is something that we either just do it or we don't do it. So, I mean, that's my 2 cents with this.
If there were consensus to put this into the operating budget this year, you'd still come in at under a 4.12% next Thursday.
We would, if we put it in this year?
Yes.
I would then recommend that we take Joe's recommendation and
Put it in-
have
just
it
put it
added
in.
to the budget, so we don't have to have this discussion again.
Right.
Well, let's take a
I'd agree.
consensus vote.
I agree.
Saya, James?
Yeah, add
Oh.
it to
It
the
belongs
budget.
there.
Yes.
Yep. We're all in agreement. Put it in the budget.
it in the
There's no,
budget.
he's right. There's
Problem
no
solved.
sense kicking it down the
Budget.
road for another year and then go, oh, now what do we do? So
Thank you.
thank you for the
it's the only
consideration.
equitable thing to
Appreciate
do
it.
for these, for the players.
Okay. Next.
Next.
So it's going to go into the budget, good.
Okay.
Favorite motion?
Favorite motion?
We even need one.
We don't need one. It's a workshop.
Oh,
Good.
Okay.
We're done. How's that?
Very
Just wanted to
good.
say that. Can I do this? We're done. How's that?
How's it going?